Chapter 24. The Gambit. The plan was a house of cards built on a fault line. It required precision, timing, and a willing sacrifice of sanity. Rook explained it to Vance, Hayes, and Anya in the shielded workshop, the air thick with the smell of ozone and dread. "We have to make it care," Rook said, his voice a low monotone, his eyes fixed on a schematic of the outpost's nervous system, power, data, life support. "Right now, we're just an anomaly. Interesting data. We need to become a narrative, a story it invests in predicting." Hayes frowned, arms crossed. "You want to trick a cosmic immune system with a story? It's not a trick. It's a paradigm shift." Rook tapped the schematic. "It thinks in terms of efficiency, simplification, stable states. We have to present it with a process, a human process, that appears to be moving toward a new, efficient stability. One that incorporates the infected as vital components." Vance understood first. Her eyes widened. "You want to make it think we're successfully integrating the pattern, that we're becoming a new, optimized hybrid, a logical next step." "Exactly," Rook said. "We stage an evolution. We use Jax's logical grid to solve a critical problem, the fungal blight. We use Leah's resonance to calm the atmospheric fluctuations. We show the sphere that its interventions aren't breaking us, they're improving us, that its infection is the key to our survival and our transformation into something more efficient." Anya looked horrified. "You want to actively use Jax and Leah as tools to validate the sphere's methods? That's monstrous." "It's survival," Rook countered, though the idea tasted like ash. "And it's a lie. The moment the sphere's model predicts our successful transformation into a stable, hybridized state, the moment it commits to that prediction as the optimal outcome, we shatter the illusion. We reveal the evolution as a ruse. We show it that the integrated components, Jax, Leah, me, are still fundamentally, chaotically human, that their logic is corrupted by emotion, their resonance by grief. We introduce a fatal contradiction between its predicted outcome and the noisy, rebellious reality." Hayes whistled softly. "You're trying to give a god an existential crisis." "I'm trying to make it question the value of its own curiosity," Rook said. "If studying us leads to recursive errors in its own predictive models, then the optimal solution might be to stop looking, to quarantine this sector of reality as fundamentally unpredictable, to leave us alone." The risk was catastrophic. If the sphere saw through the Gambit too early, it might simply accelerate its stress tests, triggering a collapse. If it believed the lie too completely, it might decide to help their transformation along in more direct, horrifying ways, and the toll on Jax, Leah, and especially Rook would be immense. "We need a crisis to solve," Vance said, thinking aloud. "Something tangible. The blight is perfect. It's a systemic threat it created. We need to stage a breakthrough, using Jax. And the atmospheric fluctuations," Hayes added. "We need Leah to appear to harmonize them." Rook nodded. "We'll need to fabricate data. I can influence the sensor feeds from my end, make them show the results we want, but the performance has to be public. The whole outpost has to see the miracles. Cars faction, everyone. The sphere monitors our social reactions as much as our systems." Anya, though pale, nodded slowly. "I can work with Jax. His why anomalies. They're questions. If I pose the blight as a logical puzzle, his patterned mind might engage with it. I can guide him toward a solution, or at least the appearance of one. And Leah, her new harmonics. If we can find a frequency that counteracts the sphere's modulation." It was decided. They would become players in their own vivisection, hoping to hand the surgeon a scalpel that would break in its hand. The performance began 2 cycles later. The blight in Hydroponics Bay 2 had spread to the primary nutrient vats. Panic was rising. Risha and her team were exhausted, faces covered in filtration masks, their frustration a bitter cloud Rook could taste. Anya brought Jax to the bay in a mobile restraint chair. The young man's eyes were still distant, fixed on some internal geometry, but his fingers twitched sporadically, the Y anomalies manifesting physically. Anya positioned him before a data slate showing the blight's growth patterns, the chemical composition of the fungal residue, and the schematics of the hydroponic systems. Jax, Anya said, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the bay's anxious hum. Analyze. The growth follows a recursive fractal pattern, iteration gamma 7. It is clogging conduits alpha through theta. Function is impaired. Propose a counteragent. Use base elements available. Potassium nitrate, concentrated citric acid, ultrasonic frequency bands. She was speaking the language of the pattern, presenting the blight not as a living thing, but as a faulty equation. Jax's head tilted. His eyes, for the first time in days, focused on the slate. The cold grid in Rook's mind flared, lines of logic intersecting, calculating. Jax's hand rose jerkily and began to trace symbols on the slate's touch surface. Not words, equations, chemical formulas intertwined with frequency modulations. Risha watched, skepticism warring with desperate hope. What is he doing? He's solving for X, Rook murmured, standing beside her, his own perception locked onto the unfolding process. He could feel the sphere's attention sharpen, a lens zooming in. This was new data, an infected subject applying its patterned logic to a systemic threat. Jax's equations produced a result, a simple, elegant formula for a compound and a specific pulsed ultrasonic frequency. It's a desiccant and resonant disruptor, Risha breathed, examining the output. We can make this. The frequency. We can modify the cleaning rig's emitters. They worked fast. The compound was mixed, a caustic, bubbling gel. The ultrasonic emitters were retuned. With a collective held breath, they applied both to an infected section of piping. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The gray, viscous blight recoiled, shriveling and turning to a dry, inert powder. The clog cleared. A cheer went up, small but genuine. Rook saw the shift in the emotional weather of the bay, the fog of despair parted by a single sharp beam of wonder. He also felt the sphere's satisfaction, a cool ripple in the psychic substrate. Positive reinforcement. Infected subject increases group survival probability. Step 1. The atmospheric fluctuations hit their peak that evening, a pounding, nauseating rhythm that had half the outpost groaning in their bunks, clutching their heads. They brought Leah to the Central Environmental Control Station, a nest of flickering screens and manual override switches. She hummed her two-note melody, her eyes reflecting the scrolling erratic data. Hayes, under Rook's guidance, had prepared a feed. A false, stabilized waveform was ready to substitute for the real data on the main display. But they needed a performance. Leah, Rook said softly, kneeling beside her chair. He didn't speak to her mind with logic. He spoke to the harmonics, the emotional echoes within her. He projected the memory of the silence after a storm, of a steady, calm heartbeat, of the deep, regular breathing of a sleeping child. He painted a psychic picture of stillness. Leah's hum changed. The two notes merged, smoothed, deepened into a single, solid, resonant tone. It was a sound of profound quiet. At the same moment, Hayes switched the feed. On the main display, the jagged, painful waveform of the atmospheric fluctuation smoothed out. The rhythm broke, replaced by a steady, green, optimal line. Fluctuation. Stabilizing, Hayes announced, his voice filled with manufactured awe. It's her frequency. She's damping it. People gathered, their headache-induced misery replaced by stunned disbelief. They looked at Leah not as a broken thing, but as a savior. The sphere's interest was palpable, a vibrating, intense curiosity. The resonator subject can modulate environmental systems. Cooperative functionality emerges. Step 2. When the narrative took hold, across the outpost, the story spread. The quiet ones weren't victims. They were evolving. They were the key. Jax the solver, Leah the harmonizer, and Rook, the rememberer who guided them. Carr's faction was thrown into disarray. Their argument, that the infected were a dangerous liability, crumbled in the face of apparent utility. Why quarantine a tool that could fix the blight and calm the air? The cold logic they championed was turned against them. But Rook could feel the cost. Jax, after his solution, had retreated deeper into his grid. The Y anomalies were fainter, as if the act of pure logic had strengthened the pattern's hold. Leah, after hours of sustained resonance, was listless. Her new melody faded to a whisper, and Rook himself felt stretched thin, a wire vibrating at the point of snapping. He was constantly broadcasting, constantly sensing, constantly maintaining the illusion for the ever-present, observing mind in the rock. The sphere's model was updating. Rook could feel its predictive algorithms shifting, assigning higher probability to a new outcome. Human pattern symbiosis, emergent stability, increased resource efficiency. It was buying the story. Now came the most dangerous part, the betrayal. They chose the water reclamation system as the stage for the final act. It was critical, visible, and already fragile. Hayes rigged a controlled failure, a valve that would stick, threatening to flood a secondary processing chamber with untreated waste. A problem complex enough to require Jax's logic, but physical enough to need human, emotional intervention to solve. The alarm sounded. Panic, real this time, flashed through the outpost. People rushed to the chamber. Jax was brought forward. Anya presented him with the problem. Pressure differentials, valve actuator specs, flow rates. Jax's mind grid engaged. Equations formed. The solution was swift. A precise sequence of overrides on 3 auxiliary pumps to reroute flow, and a specific torque application to the seized valve. Hayes and a tech followed the instructions. The pump sequence worked. The flow was diverted. Then, the tech applied the calculated torque to the valve. It sheared right off. A spray of foul, chemical-laden water erupted into the chamber. The solution had made the problem worse. The controlled failure was now a genuine, escalating crisis. Chaos. Shouts. The tech fell back, coughing. The logical, perfect answer had failed, and in that moment of crisis, Rook acted. He didn't turn to Jax for a new calculation. He turned to Leah. He didn't project logic or stillness. He projected the raw, chaotic human response to disaster, urgency, fear, protective instinct, and a furious, illogical determination to save the person now choking on the fumes. He took Leah's hand, her faint hum vibrating through his bones, and he shouted into the psychic link, not with words, but with a storm of pure, unoptimized feeling. He aimed it not at the sphere, but at Jax's cold, logical grid. The impact was catastrophic. In Rook's mind's eye, he saw Jax's perfect geometric lattice shatter. The Y anomalies exploded from fractures into roaring conflagrations of confusion, fear, and sudden, terrible empathy for the choking tech. Jax screamed, a raw human sound, his body convulsing in his restraints. Simultaneously, Leah's quiet hum erupted into a wail, the same wail she'd made when the truth of Earth's death hit her, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief and pain. The data stream the sphere was monitoring went insane. The predicted outcome of calm, efficient symbiosis collided with the reality of screaming, emotional chaos. The logical tool, Jax, had broken. The resonant stabilizer, Leah, was broadcasting distress. The human component, the crew, was reacting with messy, inefficient heroism, pulling the tech to safety, sealing the chamber with brute force, and shouted orders. Rook, at the center of the psychic maelstrom, directed the full, crashing wave of this contradiction, this glorious, catastrophic failure of the predicted model, directly back along the line of the sphere's attention. He packaged it all. The broken logic, the resonant grief, the human noise. He sent it not as an anomaly, but as a rebuttal. This is what you get when you try to calculate us. Error, pain, noise. Your models are flawed because we are flawed. We are not a puzzle to be solved. We are a storm to be weathered. And your observation is the wind that makes us stronger. For a long, terrifying moment, there was only the sound of the contained leak, Jax's sobs, Leah's wail, and the pounding hearts of the crew. Then, deep in the rock, Rook felt it. A tremor, not physical, conceptual. The vast, focusing lens of the sphere's attention wavered. The cold, patient curiosity fractured into something else. Frustration, confusion, a kind of cosmic disgust for a dataset that refused to behave. The hum that underpinned the outpost. The hum Leah had mirrored. The hum of the sphere's active observation. It changed pitch. It deepened, softened, and then began to fade. Not disappearing, but receding, pulling back, disengaging. The rhythmic atmospheric fluctuations stopped, leaving an eerie, natural stillness. The aggressive push of the fungal blight in the untouched sections seemed to stall, becoming inert, just biology again. In Rook's mind, the oppressive weight of the observation lifted, replaced by a vast, silent indifference. It was the indifference of a reader closing a frustrating book, not with anger, but with a decision that the story was not worth the effort. The gamble had worked. They had made themselves not just an anomaly, but a tedious one. An unsolvable problem that broke the tools used to solve it. The cost lay around them. Jax, curled and weeping, his mind a battlefield between resurrected humanity and shattered logic. Leah, exhausted, her wail subsiding into shivers. And Rook, his nose bleeding freely, his expanded senses in tatters, feeling more like a cracked mirror than a man. They had won their solitude back. Not through strength, but through a performance of such perfect chaotic imperfection that the universe itself had looked away, leaving them to their noisy, painful, beautifully flawed darkness.